Good morning, Dr. Grobe.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I can see that with all that sunshine behind you.
It's not a bad day to sit outside. I'm hoping that the noise is to a minimum, and I have on
Mhm.
my headphones and my microphone close to me so that hopefully it's not too noisy. But if it is, please let me know, and I'll pick myself
You
up and
you
move
are
to a
nice and
quieter
clear.
spot.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
nice and clear so that even when if you hear like a car or something go by, it sounds pretty good.
Great. I
Yeah.
thought I'd try to extend uh, anything past Labor Day when it's sunny and warm is a great time to be outside. So uh, I'm doing my best to extend my summer.
There you go. There you go. We all need a little bit more extension of the good stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Well, we were uh, batting around ideas this week for what did we want to discuss. And, this is going to turn into an hour probably of lots of little jokes because it just happens that way when you talk about poop.
Yeah.
And it seemed fitting. We've not been having the best year. Matter of fact, some people would refer to it as a crappy year. So it just seems like it's a fitting topic, but a rather serious one because,
Mhm.
we could see changes in a person and their body systems with what doesn't stick with them, and it does have some signs and such that are important. So we thought maybe it would be a good day to kind of wrap up we're not quite to the end of the year, but
Yeah.
it
A good day, a good month, and a good year to talk about poop.
poop. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yes, and already the jokes are starting. Okay, so the first thing is from a medical perspective that what comes out of our body, our discharges, tell you a lot about what's going on inside the body or how you're metabolizing things or how you're processing things or your overall health. So things like your sputum, your that phlegm that you cough up, and your sweat and your urine and your poop are examples of what would be really helpful diagnostically as far as the overall picture, what's going on with a person. In fact, hundreds of years ago, the poop and the breath and the urine were the primary ways of diagnosing just about everything because they didn't do autopsies, they didn't have lab tests or anything like that. So really, the discharges were significant in the diagnostic tools. Diabetes, for example, was diagnosed by either watching flies come to a cup of urine or tasting it because they could taste the sugar. And so, no, they weren't drinking it, but they were like, tasting kind of thing. And so, so there's a lot of history behind using this as diagnostic tools. And when it comes to things like our bowel movements, then it's very helpful because it tells us a lot about the digestive tract and where problems may lie, and also what kind of nutritional problems you could develop after that. So, for example, if someone says, I have stomach pain, well, stomach pain, a lot of people don't realize your stomach is above your navel. So, it's more likely that that is true. It's a stomach problem or liver or pancreas, possibly upper bowel problem, but anything below the navel is often bowel problem, or it could be the internal organs, like in women it could be the uterus. And so when people come to me and say stomach, I literally have to like narrow down the problem area and ask other questions and examine in order to really see if it means stomach or not. So, uh, because it might be diffuse to us, it might be just like, I don't know, it just kind of hurts down there. And
Yeah.
so, stomach pain is most commonly what would bring people in. And so, of course, one of the questions I have to ask is, what are your bowel movements like? Or what have you been eating? Or is there a change? And in these times right now, especially with people eating perhaps differently for budget reasons, for quarantine reasons, for access, seasonal, there could be some changes in your stool. That's another uh, medically appropriate word for poop.
Yeah.
So bowel
Yes.
movement, stool, okay, and then poop, and then so what kinds of things, and you had a chart that you found, which is really nice to help us. So what your stool looks like texture wise and what your stool looks like color wise are quite significant. Yeah, so here we go. We've got some, it's called a Bristol stool chart. It was done as a diagnostic tool for practitioners, and I guess laymen could do that as well. But this is an example of different kinds of stools. What I see most often on the internet is whether or not it floats or sinks. That's what everybody's all concerned about, is floating or sinking. And I've seen the wrong answer on both directions. So it doesn't even
There
matter
are
what
days
way
I'm
you
just
bounce around.
happy it comes out, you know?
Yes. And most people, that's true. So let's think about it this way. So if you're eating, food goes in, you digest it, you pull out the nutrients that you need, and then you poop out the waste, what is not useful to us. So when you're not pooping, then you are holding on to things, perhaps fermenting and composting inside you. And so then that's usually more gassy, more distension and pain and discomfort in the bowels, hemorrhoids, those kinds of things definitely will occur. And so then you'll see like the top of this chart where you see pebbly,
Mhm.
very hard to pass sometimes. You'll see sausage shape, but lumpy. It means that it's gotten a little moisture in there, but in the general, it's basically phase one above. It's just all put together. Then you get a little more clay-like. The type 3 and 4 are often very sticky and will leave streaks in the toilet. They tend to sink, and then you will have an improving stool into to 5. That's actually not too bad. It's but it's better. It's much better if it's formed. So if you think about the dog poo that you're avoiding stepping in, which is long and tubular, formed, firm, brown, that's actually appropriate. And a couple inches long is actually very appropriate. Small, so pieces are still not ideal. Okay. There's some inconsistency in your ability to digest and eliminate when you are in pieces like that.
So type
Fluffy. Yep.
is
Go ahead.
type 4 like the most normal?
Uh, that's closest to the normal. Yes.
Okay.
Um, Smooth is not always necessary because sometimes it can be too smooth, too glistening, which is on the verge of a little wet. But yeah, I'd say type 4 is probably the most normal. It should be about one piece. It should be not in pebbles stuck together. It should be tapered on an end usually because that's your rectum closing down on it. Um, yeah, it looks narrow to me in this picture. I like to see it a little bit rounder, but I'd look at about an inch in diameter, depending, and I'm talking about adult size,
Yes.
that seems appropriate. When you start going the other extreme, okay, so you go from hard to pretty normal, and then you start getting softer, you get fluffy or flocculent, or it'll be formed when you have the bowel movement, but you flush it and it all falls apart. It just like dissolves. There's also, which I don't see on this chart, uh, the cow pie, where it comes out as a liquid pie. It's not really formed, but it's not watery either. And it's not fluffy or pieces. It's like a cow pie, literally. Um, and so any of those directions where it's too watery is going in the diarrhea direction. And then you
Which
also
is
have to
great for
think,
a cow, but not for a human,
oh, definitely not
maybe.
good for a human. Yeah,
Yeah.
because all that liquid that you have not absorbed means those are all those nutrients that you got from your food that you did not absorb. Okay. So you have one extreme where you're composting and fermenting inappropriately inside the body and hanging on to things and toxins, your own body toxins. And on the other end, you're flushing down all your nutrients. Okay. So both ends can cause a problem or be signs of a problem. Um, and frequency, like you're like, oh, I have a watery stool, but it's only like once a month, is not as bad as I have it 5 times a day. So that's a difference as well as far as extent or condition. A lot of people will have bowel changes with diet changes, with travel, with seasonal, like I said, diet as well with that. And also with emotional. A lot of times our emotions affect our bowel movements, frequency, especially, but also texture. So there are definitely people in the condition of irritable bowel syndrome where it's not just a physical problem, it is very much linked to emotional. The state of your emotional stress in irritable bowel diagnosis will often trigger an abnormal stool. Okay. So when we're talking about what is normal, a lot of times people will go to the doctor and fill out a questionnaire and it'll say, "Do you have normal stools?" Well, if you don't know what abnormal is, or you know you're not bleeding, therefore you're pooping every day, it must be normal, right? So a lot of people say
Yeah.
yes and not realize what we're really looking for. So it's a very poorly worded question. Or the doctor themselves will say, "Do you have normal stools?" And so I try and make a point of saying, "Do you have a bowel movement every day?" And if they say yes, then I go, "Is it brown? Do you see undigested food? Do you see mucus? Is it watery? Is it formed?" I'll ask these additional questions to make sure I know that we are on the same page as what
Right.
normal is.
You're
Um,
very thorough, and you take lots of time with your patients, whereas in my own personal experience, I've gone into the medical doctor, nurse practitioner, and there's about 7 minutes of the entire appointment, and it just seems that I have more success in working with naturopathic than just because of the thoroughness of the
Yeah, because
appointment.
a short visit, you can get the pertinent information as far as like, I have stomach pain, it's here. You'll get the sound bites. But sometimes it's in the details that gives you the better information. Um, I, there's a lot of things, and that could be a whole discussion in itself. But if you rely on your diagnostic tests for everything, then you're not going to be asking a lot of those questions too. And
Well,
sometimes it's less important for whatever you're dealing with
and
at that
I
time.
would say I am very aware, when my children were younger, of the quality and frequency of their poop.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
and now
mothers usually are.
as
Yes,
a dog mom, I'm very aware of the quality of my dog's poop, because
yes.
I dogs process food very rapidly. And I
Hmm.
don't know about cats. I'm not a cat person. You can respond to that. But as I make a correlation, um, I also understand that people that hunt game look for the quality in the scat, because then they know what the thing that they are hunting, whether it's deer or elk or bear or whatever, they look for the sign, if you will, in the scat. So this is a science.
Yes, actually, you were quite correct. I'd forgotten about what the hunters get from it. But I'll give you a personal story as far as my dog. Uh, I got a puppy who was a blend. She was a Shepherd Husky Lab mix. All I knew about the history was the mom was a Lab Husky mix, and the Shepherd was a stray, mangy Shepherd that just found mom in the woods when they were walking, did his deed, off he went, and they had a litter of puppies. And so my puppy started to get mange very early on in life, and terrible ear infections and mange. And we took her to the vet, and the vet said she has not fleas, uh, whatever that, mites. She has mites. So you need to dip her in mitoban, which is you give them a bath with this mitoban, which is basically dipping them in pesticide to kill these mites. And we tried it once. Now I am a naturopath. I was very against this, but I didn't know what else to do at the time. And we went ahead and did this. And that poor puppy sat in that bath and just shook with pain this whole time we gave her this bath. And it did not improve her condition. In fact, her skin got worse and worse and worse. Her ears got
Oh my
worse. She was
goodness.
losing hair. It was terrible. And I told my husband, I said, I would rather put her to sleep and out of her misery than do this ever again. So I started doing some research on diets, and where I started was the wild diet, because I knew the shepherd and the husky were closer to a wild dog than perhaps the lab. And so, and I knew
Right.
the dad was a shepherd and had mange. So I started looking in the wild diet and what these dogs should be eating. Because of course my dog is eating, commercial kibble, right? So I started going toward a raw diet or a meat diet, a more natural diet with the dog. And I was giving her initially cooked meat, and I was giving her essential fatty acids and vitamins, and any vegetable that we made for our dinner. And I was giving her rice or barley because I was still convinced she needed some sort of grain, but I took out wheat. I'm like, what would I do if this was a human being? I would take out wheat, okay? Because I know how hard it is on the bowel. And I was picking up her poop one day and I saw mucus encased barley. And I went, oh my God, she can't tolerate grains at all. Because I was giving her alternative grains and she was literally pooping out all the grains undigested. So looking at the stool gave me a huge clue. I immediately took out all grains and it was just meat. And at that time, I still gave her some potatoes or some kind of starch like that. But
But meat and
meat and vegetables,
vegetables, kind of
basically,
like
and
we'd eat. Yeah.
oils, and this even before I took out the barley. Her coat had improved. Her ear infections disappeared. We were taking her for a walk one day. We were at a festival. A person who apparently had one of the puppies recognized, asked where we got her, if we got her at the same place. I said yes. And they go, oh my God, what'd you do? How come the coat is so good? Because obviously they'd been having mange. So I told them what I knew up to that point. I didn't know yet about the grains in general, but she was looking so healthy. And so all her entire life, if we ever tried to give her commercial food with any grain at all in it, she would get her mange or ear infections or arthritis as she got older.
Hmm.
And when I took out all the grains and went to a dog appropriate diet for a wild dog, she was healthy all her life, had a magnificent coat, was never sick. And so that taught me more than anything that you have to pay attention to the stool and the digestion. Um, so in people, we have a lot of problems with our food supply in the damage and the pesticides and the chemicals and the robbing of nutrients and so many things going on. So it's a lot more complicated than just take out rice or barley or wheat. Because it's in some cases it's not always the wheat, it's the glyphosate and the Roundup, or the Roundup chemicals, I should say. I want people to know it's not just glyphosate. Um, but the
Which is a pesticide.
Right, which is a pesticide, and it's supposed to be inert, but it targets the good bacteria in our gut. So in our intestinal tract, we have good flora, we have and the good flora include our probiotics, or acidophilus is the most common that we recognize, and that is alive. That is a bacteria that helps us. It actually produces an environment that's healthy for us to continue our digestive process and absorption. And when that is not present, or present in enough volume, you get the wrong pH of your stool. You can't reduce inflammation in the lining of the bowel. You can't absorb nutrients as appropriately. You are prone to other organisms overgrowing. Now, part of normal flora is also yeast and E. coli. Those are normal bacteria. They're abnormal when they grow too much, when they're like overabundant, which would happen when your good bacteria, your lactobacillus types, are not present. We've also discovered over the past couple of years, when flora in the bowel was like the thing, the trend lately, is that diversity, as in all things, is actually beneficial. You don't want just one strain. You want a whole bunches of different kinds in the bowels, and that's healthier. So when you're looking at a stool and you're looking at these abnormals on either end, you get a good idea of what's not appropriate. Like the watery stool, for example, definitely needs some changes with the pH and with the um, uh, bacteria balance in there. Perhaps they have a parasite. Sometimes you'll get a parasite, especially when you get to the watery level. Or you have to look at chronic inflammation of the bowel. And is there a food trigger? And that's where you'd look for allergies. Constipation can occur because you're hypothyroid, because you're sedentary, because you have a liver stagnation. So there's some other things higher up in the digestive system that could cause constipation besides locally just not moving. Exercise makes a big, big difference in constipation. Also, again, the mental emotional state. You can either purge too quickly with the watery or looser stool, or you could retain things. When we call people anal retentive, okay, that's actually not a
Right.
joke. It's actually, it means the person holds everything inside. And
Kind of
so it
that
can
nervous.
translate to the bowel as well. Exactly. We clench
Yeah.
and we hold things in. People who can't go to public restrooms, for example, would also have a similar problem where they just can't let go. They can't release. Believe me, go to a cleanse where you're like having bowel movements every few hours because of all these herbs and things you're taking, and there's just a shower curtain separating you. You get over that pretty fast.
Yeah.
But there, yeah, because you can't hold it in. You can't hold it in when you're doing purgative herbs. So,
Yeah.
but as far as having a normal stool, I really want it like one uniform piece. And if you're having if you're having meals 3 times a day, you should be having a minimum of one a day of a bowel movement, but ideally 2 to 3. You should ideally having a bowel movement because whatever you ate on the top end is pushing out on the bottom end. So it's like you digest, put it through the mill, you break it down with your saliva, you break it down with your stomach acids, pancreatic enzymes, bile salts, all that helps break things down all the way from the liver, gallbladder, right at the top of the ribs, left side, right side, all going through there. You're making a smoothie. Okay. From the smoothie, it goes into the small intestine, and this is where you absorb all the nutrients. So, somebody who's getting a loose or watery stool, you know they've got a small intestine possible problem because it's purging from the I'm supposed to be absorbing the smoothie stage. Okay. If you have a harder stool, it means it got all the way down there, but now we have a problem with the bowel movement. It could still mean like a pancreatic enzyme deficiency or a bile salt deficiency as far as higher up, but you know at least got there. And you got some of your nutrients from it. So it's less likely to be a nutrient deficiency and more like a I can't break it down problem. Then food allergies develop from some of these problems. I can't break it down. You can have the floaty, fatty, or lighter colored stool, or yellow or green is often liver, can't metabolize fats, gallbladder, those issues. The sticky sitting on the bottom of the toilet kind of thing. That one can sometimes be a problem because you're not getting enough fiber in your bowel. You're getting perhaps too much protein. Those are possibilities going on with that. There's a lot of components to it. A lot of
Sure.
people will experience seasonally a looser stool just because they ate so much fruit. Think of all that fiber, that wet
Hmm.
fiber that's
Yeah.
going in there. It's like it tastes so good, but you have to
Like
back off.
lettuce is mostly water. So if you're doing lots of
Yeah.
lettuce or greens in the summer, that may make a difference.
Some
Uh,
people it might. I'm going to say the people who tend to be phlegmy or cold or chilly in constitution are more likely to react to lettuce that way if they had an overabundance. But we're talking more like iceberg, not like romaine. Those kind of lettuces
right.
tend to be digested a bit better, not so watery.
So now that we know what normal is,
Mhm.
and I guess I am aware that a black tarry stool is abnormal. But other abnormal things would be obviously bright red blood in the
Mhm.
stool. Other things that you watch for clues, as you've been describing, undigested food.
Well, a white stool is a very bad sign that there's something going on with the liver or gallbladder. That's a very bad sign about metabolism. White is basically your cholesterol, your fat. You have completely not metabolized it, and there's a definite problem going on there. It can be a sign of a bigger disease. Green is a sign of often a gallbladder dumping or flushing. isn't a big problem if it's just a one-time thing and directly as a result of doing a cleanse of some kind for that purpose, but it shouldn't be happening normally. And bright red blood is usually an indication of hemorrhoids or some bleeding down in the rectum or lower bowel. It is not a sign of higher up blood. So that's why when you go to the doctor and they are concerned about internal bleeding, especially in older people or people on blood thinners, where things get more fragile, it's easier to bleed. They will give you a little card to put some of your poop on the card, and what they're looking for is hidden blood. Now, what you described as tarry could be a
Hidden
hidden
blood.
blood sign because it'll be very black or very dark. So that can be a problem with it showing up in that. Now, some people will see a red stool and panic, and it turns out it was the beets they ate. Beets are notorious
Right.
for coloring the stool, or possibly the water in the stool. So that comes out normal. You don't see it on the bowel movement itself, but you'll see it in the water floating kind of pinkish, and people are like, oh my God, I'm bleeding, or on the tissue. Those are,
Hmm.
so you really have to think about, did you eat beets? And before you panic about it, especially, and a doctor would not be inclined to think it was bleeding unless they knew that the person had chronic digestive troubles, or uh, or they were elderly, fragile, blood thinners, that kind of thing. A young person, 20s, 30s, and they called about blood, they'd be like, or that first question should be, did you eat beets? Would be the first, and
Yeah.
it could be beets in a smoothie. It could be, so sometimes people don't always know
And
specifically.
I would say that uh, I would think that there would also be, constipation. I don't know that they'd necessarily make the leap to test the thyroid uh,
No,
with
it's more a
constipation, but
combination.
maybe.
Yeah, it's a combination of symptoms. So constipation, it would be in part of my rule out to think about the thyroid, but I would consider other questions and answers and exams before I would say, oh, this is a thyroid
Sure.
problem.
Yeah.
Undigested food is a common one, and a lot of people say normal to their bowel movement because they're having it every day and not having discomfort when they have it, but they're not mentioning that they have undigested food. So I do make a point of asking that specific question. The most common that shows up undigested is corn. It's almost like we put it back together, in fact.
No one, no,
Yeah, it's very
we were
odd.
having this discussion actually
Yeah.
in my family of hunter folks. And I said, no animal, no mammal digests corn. And then they went on to, we don't think we've ever seen an orca whale eat corn. So, skip the
Oh,
mammal thing.
yeah.
But animals just don't. And
Well, they don't digest it well. They definitely, you have to break it and get into the internal. There's a lot to it. It's pretty indigestible unless we process it in some way, like tortillas, or uh, like eating corn on the cob, or eating it raw. You might have a better digestion of it if you have a healthy bowel, healthy digestive process. Um, Eating it cooked or canned, that kind of pre-digests some of it for you, so that can help sometimes. So I wouldn't say never shows up, or always shows up in the stool, but it often, very, very often shows up in the stool. What you shouldn't see is lettuce, threads of lettuce, green, or sprouts. A lot of people who like to add sprouts to their meal. If you have sprouts coming out the other end, you are simply not digesting it. So there's no point in adding it in there unless you like the crunch. Um, but those are signs of pancreatic enzyme deficiency, usually, that you're not digesting the fibers, or that you need a more solid fiber like flax or chia, or psyllium, than you do of the green fibers, because the different kind of fibers, a lot of green plant type of fibers, they add water and moisture to the stool, but they still pretty much go out of us to some degree. We only get some small part of it. That's why if you really want the goodies from that, we get blue green algae into your diet, and you absorb it without having to digest it, because so many of us can't digest a lot of the green plant fibers. We love them, but a lot of those we're not really getting full access to just naturally as who we are. We're not cows, you know. We don't have two stomachs and specific teeth to chew. And most of us don't chew our food. I will say that. A lot of us, you know, we wolf our food, or we're busy talking or something. And yeah, we're not doing intentional chewing. In fact, there's a whole discipline in Ayurveda where that's what you do, is you count like specific number of bites and or chewing before you swallow. And it's to because your saliva is the first part of digestion in addition to your teeth. And so making sure you can chew and bite and break it down properly means everything else down the system is going to work better. And if
Well,
we're
and
wolfing our food,
by
we're not doing
chewing,
that.
yeah,
Mhm.
by chewing, that's that mastification process that actually starts the digestive enzymes to kick in and work.
Yes,
So,
yes. Our the sensory and the mechanical function of us chewing will actually start the parotid and uh, the glands in your cheeks. You actually have glands in your cheeks that aid the digestive process and the immune process, I might add. And the your scent, your smell. If we're eating because it's noon and not because we've been smelling food or our stomach is growling, what we're doing is we're just dumping stuff on and nothing is there available to break it down. If we're drinking cold drinks, it slows down the digestive process or dilutes it. If you're going to drink a drink, drink it after the meal, not during the meal, especially if it's cold or iced. Uh, you're better off sipping warm drinks either throughout the day or at least if you're going to have something with a meal. Uh, but yeah, that you know, smelling mom cooking the pot roast all day kind of thing, and get you hungry. Like Thanksgiving Day, we're all waiting for one particular meal, and so we're not usually grazing as much because we want to leave room for overeating. But that smell is getting our digestive system going. That metabolism going so that it's ready. You've got the bubbling soup ready to take it on and break it down really quickly for you. Now, overeating can slow that down and make it difficult because you have too much food to work through before you perhaps have another meal. Eating when you're stressed or upset. They say don't eat. It's like an old adage, don't eat when you're upset. It's very true because if you do, you're not secreting the digestive juices. You're putting them into some other aspect of yourself. And and that kind of goes with that, you know, holding things in kind of idea or purging things before it's appropriate because you're just upset. Your nervous system isn't there. When you're sedentary, you should eat less. And if you're very physically active, you should eat more. And we, as a culture, America is terrible at this. We should not eat our primary meal at dinner time and then go to bed. Because what we do is we eat, we have dessert, we have snacks, and then we go to bed. Oh my God, that's called the sumo diet. That's
right?
what makes us gain weight. If we were to do more farmer style and eat a bigger meal morning or afternoon when we're more physically active, it would help us burn off the calories. We would have all day to burn off the calories. Some people do that pretty good, like around lunchtime sometimes, but a lot of people will get that sleepiness after lunch, which culturally is not usually our thing here because we don't take naps after lunch. But other cultures, especially South American cultures, they do. Even Asian cultures, they do. They will have like a half-hour lunch and a half-hour nap or rest, and then they get going for the afternoon.
That
And
was
do that.
my experience when we lived in the South. I was
Mhm.
down living in the southern United States for 2 years, and it was breakfast, and some people called it lunch, other people called it supper.
Mhm.
So it was kind of that, you know, meal around the noon hour, but it could
Mhm.
have been anywhere from noon to 3. And they did take a nap. It was very humid and exhausting. And
Mhm.
so I could see how necessary it was. So they would eat and then they would have their nap and then they would return to work.
Mhm.
You know, during this sequestration time, many of us have become almost biphasic where we're sleeping for a shorter period of time at night, if we're falling asleep at night, and then awake for part of the day and then taking a nap somewhere in, you know, so that we're having 2 sleep cycles in the day. Just interesting. It's been very interesting.
And that can be helpful for people who need a little recharge. That's actually, there's nothing wrong with that. Oftentimes we're better, more clear in our minds. You know, I mentioned in some Asian cultures that they do take afternoon naps, but I've also seen some aspects of the Asian culture, especially in the strong push business wise, that they work through lunch. And I know studies have been done that have proven that people actually do better when they get a rest than if they push, because we just become so fatigued, we just can't do anything. We can't
Well,
think, we make mistakes.
I think I've seen, you know, articles and things about people that work at Google that they actually have like this little capsule room that they can go to take a 20-minute or 30-minute nap, and they're much more creative when they come out of their slumber. And that's how I got through chemistry in college, was to take a power nap before I got to chemistry, because it was not my strong suit. I certainly loved other scientific classes like microbiology and some of the physics, but basic chemistry was just so boring.
Yeah, unless you really like chemistry, it's boring to just about everybody else.
Yeah, no.
My interest in it has improved as I've gone into other fields than my interest, but at the time, yeah, I was just get through it. Okay, so there's a lot that your bowel will tell you. So it's very important that you turn around and look, that you even look at your paper to check the color, so that you can see what's normal for you. And normal for you can vary a little bit depending what you're eating. So being aware, you know, of your diet, conscious of your diet would be my recommendation. Take your time to chew, helps significantly, makes you conscious, and perhaps maybe more appreciative of the food that you have available to you, of whatever degree. And if you're spiritually minded, I recommend praying over your food, or at least taking a moment to be grateful for it, because your intention when eating also helps. Even if it's not the best quality of food, but that's what you have, then I recommend that intention as well. Because if you intend and are grateful for it, then that higher energy, that higher intention with it, does translate with what your body is able to do with it as well. We are more relaxed, we're more willing and open to take in. And if you're worried about any chemicals or things you can't control in it, then intend that the negative stuff will have to pass through, that it will be waste, that it will be eliminated. And if that's, you know, pure intention, we know prayer, long distance work. So why wouldn't intention and prayer and focus on something make a difference on how you metabolize your food? There are tons of things you can do for abdominal pain or abnormal stools, which, you know, is more than scope here, but I can touch on a few things. So if you have abdominal pain and you're not sure if it's your bowels, but it could be, because your bowels go, let's see, I might be oriented wrong as far as you. So on my right, okay, right across and then down my left, okay, is the direction of the bowels. And so you could have pain anywhere on the right side of the navel. That would be the ascending colon, the stuff going up. So it's going against gravity, okay? And that's another reason not to overeat, because you need to have room in there and flexibility of the bowel in order to push against gravity. And then the transverse colon goes basically from rib to rib, or in women, breast to breast, right under the ribs, or right under that rib cage area. And a lot of times it will be sagging, but it's held by these suspensory ligaments. So it can be sagging. So another reason to have your bowel movements go through you efficiently, because if things back up, then they hang here and then they make it sag some more. And so that it makes even harder to get over that last little loop. So keeping the integrity, you don't want a baggy pantyhose bowel. You want a nice, flexible, firm bowel, but soft to expand and contract, expand and contract. And that's how you push your stool through. It doesn't have its own muscular system, except that the muscles are in the bowel itself. They're not separate. It's not like your bicep or something where its action affects the circulation and
Right.
things on
It's
surrounding.
it's in the
It's
surrounding lumen.
right. It's
Yeah.
woven into the fabric, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so it's contractile, it's elastic. And so it can be overstretched too long chronically. And it can also snap back depending on what we do with it. And so then it comes around that last corner, hopefully not going uphill again. And then it comes down the bowel. And then, so you have the descending colon, and then you have the latter parts there that most often when we get a colonoscopy are just checking the last couple inches down by the rectum. But when you get it, that's the colon area. But if you get a scope for the bowel, like a lower GI test, they are going into the lower part of that descending colon. And I'm not sure how far they go, but they go a ways. And they're looking at the color, the texture, any lesions, like ulcers going on, any bumps. That's where the polyps can show up. And actually, I take that back. They do go all the way now with their scoping. They didn't used to go, but they go pretty much the whole
Sure.
colon area.
And I know as well, when you talk about the that area like around the navel, that is, should you have a problem with the appendix, there's very often the pain is referred there to the center, the appendix area. So I don't recall in any of my reading that there really is any bowel changes that are noticed around the time of a problem with the appendix. It just kind of gets impacted, and but maybe you have some.
Yeah, the appendix is considered vestigial. It's not an active organ, but it is actually literally attached to the bowel. It's believed that it had a function and then it's become dysfunctional
Irrelevant.
or irrelevant, yeah, for other functions in the body. And but I do find that a chronic bad diet or fast food diet will trigger an appendicitis appendix, which the appendix is this tiny little thing. It's not very big at all.
Looks like a
But
worm, doesn't it?
yeah, it does kind of look like that. And it doesn't, it's very hard to pinpoint sometimes. It's not like, oh, my bowel hurts right here. It can be on the opposite side. It can be generalized. It could be you're feverish, your tummy hurts chronically. What I would suggest, and it often happens in children, but it can happen in adults just as easily. But I definitely feel there's a relationship to your diet when it's triggered, in adults at least. But the fever or raised white blood cells in a blood test sometimes. So my ex-husband had that happen, and he had just this generalized pain in his abdomen, but it wouldn't go away. It just stayed there. It was always
Right.
chronically there for a couple days, and then it would start to get worse. And we thought it might be appendix because there was nothing else going on. He'd never had any digestive trouble. He wasn't a history of bowel problems. And I knew his diet was terrible, not because of me, but so he went to the doctor, they drew his blood, but he still didn't have elevated white blood cells. But when the doctor examined him, he was able to really pinpoint it.
Yeah.
And so the
Had some
doctor went
rebound
in
tenderness.
anyway. He went in anyway, and sure enough, and he said this was about to explode because it gets swollen and tender, and it just, and when it explodes, that's the danger, because now you have a systemic infection in an abdominal area that should not have anything in there. And so that's why it can be so dangerous. And in children, it can be very urgently dangerous. So it's really important on appendicitis. So if you've got abdominal pain, especially if it lingers, even if it never gets really high, but it lingers, it's worth at least getting a blood test or check your temperature. Everybody knows checking their temperature. Don't check with the infrared on your forehead. Check your wrist. It's actually more accurate. Or the anacube, the fold of your elbow. Those are more accurate than this with an infrared thermometer. Infrared thermometer needs to be done by a physician knowing exactly how far away. And I will tell you, I still get inconsistent even when I know where I need to be. And I don't like people radiating their heads. And your wrist is safer, 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 safer.
I
But
must
that's a
tell
way
you
to
that
check.
we've been testing that way more often, and I've been requesting that people test away from my forehead. But
Mhm.
the same little unit, the little thing with the trigger,
Mhm.
they use on fire departments to check the temperature of walls for fire extension.
Mhm.
So it is a handy little tool, but really not. It
Not appropriate for your
we're not, we're
brain.
our body
Yeah.
should be a consistent temperature. Now, mine is as cold as a reptile, if you ask my husband, because I'm always chilly. Uh, and it's if I'm above 98.89, I have a fever. That because
Well,
I run
yeah.
97.1. So
Mhm.
I ask the person, what is your normal body temperature?
Mhm.
Because that would be like, what is your normal blood pressure? What is your
Right.
normal, what does your normal poop look like? What, because how has it
So,
changed?
well, for the purposes of CV 1984, we've got a problem of the temperature needs to be like in the 100 to 103 area that would be classically called a fever. But when we're and so good. Anything 100 or less than 100, that's what we want. We don't want anything higher than that for that purpose.
Correct.
But for a person knowing that they're ill or having something brewing inside them, yes, knowing what your normal is, which for many people is actually below what we call the average. Just kind of a segue into or sideline on temperatures is the temperatures that are 97.8, that is considered the classic normal, really only applies to young teenage people because they tend to have that normal. Women, especially if they're cycling, and that could include the post-pubescent female as well, is they are only going to be normal at certain times of their cycle. So the first half of the cycle, their temperature tends to be lower than
That's
that
true.
norm. And
That
the
is true.
second half of the cycle, after ovulation, it would be more likely to approach that. We vary day to day to day. So a 98 or 90s, 98.6, 97.8, those the 98.6, excuse me, is the classic. But honestly, most of us never reach that or stay there. And as we get older, it tends to go down in general. So yeah, when you're looking for a temperature, it's a huge range of what quote unquote is normal. So
Sure.
knowing it, I have not had a single patient say, "Oh yeah, my temperature runs normal." They're always like, "Oh no, my temperature is always below 98 or always below 97.5 or
Sure.
below, not usually below 97, but below 98.2 or something. They never achieve the optimal, which is supposed to be the standard, and that's not even true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 100
It's
degree
like,
fever could be a fever. Yeah.
right. But sitting in a warm car as you're waiting, and that's the other thing
Hmm.
too. It's like, okay, if you've been
Well, that's
waiting in
why.
your warm
Yeah.
car, it's,
Yeah.
if you're in Arizona, it's stifling hot. You've got your AC going as you're waiting in the car. But around here, I'm, basking in the heat because I like to be warm. And I go in and it's like, oh gosh, you're at 99.
Hmm.
You're at 99. I'm like, oh, well, I've been sitting in a hot car. So
Well, the
yes,
problems with that is, like you said, the face is very vascular, so it can flush easily and it can cool off easily depending on external influences like wind or something. Wrist could, but we tend to wear a watch there or we tend to have them covered. or they're closer to our body in general, and so they're not as affected by external temperatures as much. So that's why I think the wrist and the elbow are much better. And I
Well,
have
and we,
tested this theory, and it's
yeah,
true. I find it
yeah.
consistent and much healthier evaluation. The ear thermometers are a good way to tell as well.
Mhm.
Um, but we can do a whole show about that if people had
Sure.
questions. So as far as bowel movements, my suggestion is look at your poop. Always look at your discharges. Look at your poop. Look at your urine. Turn around and look before you flush. Um, Look at your texture. Look at your color. I those are all questions I want to know. See if there's any mucus or blood, anything floating in the water. See, don't panic if it's floaty, don't panic if it's sinking. It's one of those things that, start comparing it to what you ate. Usually the meal before or 2 meals before. To see. And if you're doing once a day, that's fine. If you're doing twice a day, to me, that's even better. They will probably be smaller if you're doing it more often, and that's fine. But some people have just one large one, and that's fine. Um, and then, if you're not moving your bowels, then that is number one priority. Got to get going. So, digestive enzymes, you can do, if you're really constipating, you can do smooth move tea. You can do, just caution on the cascara sagrada, which is very purgative for people. So, you can do a little too much sometimes. Um, Making sure you have fiber in your diet, like the psyllium husk is the cheapest, but if you have chronic inflammation, then you want to do maybe ground chia or ground flax instead. Um,
What
if
about
you
for children?
children, I actually
Hmm.
use the ground chia or flax, uh, sometimes acacia, acacia powder. For some people to have regular bowel movements.
Hmm.
Now, children, because they're growing, it could also be a sign they need more calcium and magnesium, because they need that for their bone growth, which means they don't have it to go through their bowels for them. And you got to make sure hydration. Some kids are big drinkers of water, and some are not.
Sure.
Um, and so the main things that I look for supplementally for constipation is digestive enzymes, essential fatty acids like fish oil or other kinds of oils, uh, taken on a regular basis. And usually liquid calcium magnesium, because a small amount, you absorb it faster in a liquid. And a small amount at bedtime, like anywhere from a teaspoon to a tablespoon, often will make you pretty regular in the daytime. But what I suggest does depend on what their diet is, so that I know whether or not they need a nutrient, or whether or not they
Sure.
need a purgative, or whether or not they need fiber. Um, a lot of people would do the fiber con and that kind of stuff. And the problem with some of that dissolves clear is that it's not it's not an insoluble fiber. It's not one that bulks the stool. It's more like eating lettuce. It's a wet
Mm.
fiber. Okay. So you need some of that more scrapey kind of fiber. And
Sure.
that's why I like the ground
And
kind.
exercise. I
Ground
mean,
soup.
really, going out
Exercise,
and
circulation.
walking is really circulation and all
Do you
that.
know
Get
one of the classic things that a person needs exercise is if they go shopping and they have to have a bowel movement while they're shopping. They're constipated, can't do it all day long, but as soon as they go shopping, one, they're taking their time and relaxing, and two, they're exercising. And those two in combination will almost always trigger bowel movement in some people. And when that happens, then you know that you need more exercise, hands down. And you're probably feeling a little anal retentive, so you need to work on your motor. Yeah. And do other things that relax you, put you in a Zen mode. So then you can do it in the privacy of your home instead of public restrooms.
wonderful.
Um, so is, yeah, I don't know. Is there any other particular question? I mean, we could joke about this all day.
We could, you know, it's, I've seen so many fun little memes about, uh, if anything's going to happen, it's going to be in the year 2020, like the asteroids are coming, like,
Mhm.
any day. And when we were talking about it, I just went, this is a very appropriate
Topic.
topic.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
You know,
don't
we have,
hold it in. Let it go out.
yeah,
And
let
we
it
should
go
do that
out.
emotionally with all this terrible
Yeah.
year.
This,
Just
and
all of it. Just let it flow
we
through
now
you.
have, you know, the kids have gone back to their various, uh, I'm going to call it hybrid school, because some are doing
Yeah, various
homeschool, some are,
versions.
you know, there's lots
Mhm.
of different versions depending on where you are in the country and what's working with your school district. But that's, you know, the pressure is on moms and dads and caregivers to help with schoolwork, to kids are hungry, kids are, you know, all of this. And so uh having this topic be educational is super helpful, because you do have the opportunity uh, to be mostly in charge of what you're eating, what's being put in front of you, because you're the preparer,
Mhm.
or it's being provided. Some people are have the meals provided, but it's not as quick as it used to be. We've really slowed down and had to prepare.
And that is one of the advantages of what's going on right now is people are around family more. So in some circumstances that does relax us or make us happier. And we are in control of our food more for some. And especially the hurry, go, 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 nobody's home, we're all going 7 different directions. That type of family has really changed dynamically and in a positive, I think, as far as having more control. Now, budget is a concern, and some people staying at home is more stressful. So there, it is having negative effects on others. But you know, a lot of systems, including the schools district, are trying to compensate for that and provide food. And I just read in our region that in order to keep the farmers going and actually help them harvest their produce and give them place for it, the FDA or US, I think it's the FDA, is allowing the farmers to harvest their food and give it for free to families that will go to various pickup stations. Anybody with a child will, the farmer receives the funds, the school receives the funds, I believe, for distributing it. And the family gets free food weekly that is provided from local farmers.
That is
That's like a win, win,
wonderful.
win, win. So it helps keep everybody employed and everybody going. It just started here like last week. I just found out about it this week. Or it started this week, excuse me. I just found out about it like the day after.
Sure.
So that's going to go at least until program changes. But I think that's phenomenal. That will help a lot of people have access to local farm fresh food that they can do with. And thank goodness for Pinterest and Google. You can find a
Right.
recipe for anything out there.
Well, it, you know, your box that you pick up comes with
Mhm.
some thing you've never seen before. And the
Mhm.
first thing out of the child's mouth is going to be, I'm not going to eat that, because they
Well,
don't
yeah,
know what it is.
yeah.
We all fear what we don't understand, right? So make it fun
Mhm.
and look up
Well, my
recipes.
meatloaf,
And
I put ground chia and flax instead of breadcrumbs. I put, if I have a zucchini or a squash or some green spinach that needs to be eaten up, I will throw that in there and adjust my dry things
that's
appropriately.
wonderful.
And my kid gets vegetables and good fiber with a meatloaf. And we love meatloaf in this house. So we do all kinds of stuff. Cauliflower, if I think we're getting past the season for that, but cauliflower, you can disguise that in mashed potatoes, even if they insist on the mashed potatoes. Although many people make the pureed cauliflower so tasty that people don't even know it's not mashed potatoes. And there's
That's
all kinds of
wonderful.
way of getting in some yummy veggies as well. So people have the time now potentially to create some healthier meals that incorporate all this farm produce that we desperately need to pick, and your bowels will love you for it. That's definitely my number one. Your bowels will love you.
Well, what goes in should come out in a timely manner. So
Correct. So what's a
we
timely
are,
manner? What's a timely manner?
uh, same day.
Same day or the next day. So if you had dinner last night, your morning bowel movement should be either that meal or the meal prior. Okay, because so sometimes it's a little slower before it translates,
Sure.
but it should never be, I ate it and an hour later it all comes out, because yes, you digest it in that amount of time, but it shouldn't be coming out quite so fast. You have to have time to absorb it.
And not
So,
4 days later.
right. And that's where you're often going to see undigested food as well, as if you have a very rapid transit time, is what we call
Sure.
that. But you
Yeah.
also don't want a slow one where everything's in there composting and
Yeah,
fermenting
for days and
for
days.
days and days. And then we're very bloated and very gassy,
Yes.
usually.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Grobe. And
You're
as
welcome.
always, if people would like to make an appointment with you, you are doing lots of wonderful things on Zoom, and they can contact you at drgrobe@gmail.com,
Correct.
and office number
360.
360
Yeah.
527
Yep.
2812.
Yep. Yep.
Wonderful.
And thank you. It was fun. I obviously could talk about this for a while.
It's a science. As much as we don't want to analyze, and we think of it as dirty and disgusting, but it's truly part of our process, and it's necessary to understand what's going on.
Yes.
So we might be able to catch things early, which is really helpful.
Yeah, and I think your analogy of like what the hunters can tell about the animal is really important. And farmers who have animals, if they analyze their stools, they have a good idea of how the feed is doing as well. So it is truly a science. When I was in my undergrad college, that was something we actually studied, was the effects of the nutrition, and that's how they came down to this animal needs this milligrams or this person needs that milligrams, as they've been studying what the stools
yeah.
look like. So,
And they've got, not that humans, but with animals, when you have a herd like of cows, happy cows produce milk, right? So they know, and they keep track of what each individual cow needs for their nutrition, and if it's a supplement that's needed, then that's what they do.
right.
So
So we can translate all of that same to us.
we sure can.
The only problem I would say is I haven't seen anybody translate the same information from bird poop, but it makes fantastic fertilizer. So there's that.
There you go. Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr.
You're
Grobe.
welcome.
We'll
Thank
chat
you.
again soon.
All right. Bye-bye.